nationwide, what are the trends that you're seeing specifically for sirens and the role that they play in the overall communication system for things like floods, hurricanes, other natural disasters?
So sirens are a really important tool in the alerting toolkit. It's not the one silver bullet, so to speak. It is just one of the many tools that are available, and they're best used for outdoor settings because the sirens themselves cannot, or they're not designed to reach into buildings, and they're not going to alert people who are inside of buildings. But in terms of being an outdoor alerting structure, they're very useful for getting people's attention, and helping people to recognize that they need to do something, pay attention. There's different kinds of sirens. Some have like a high-low signal to them or different tones, repeating tones, long signals, short signals, which can signify different kinds of hazards. And that requires a lot of public education and public training so that people know what the hazard is and what they're supposed to do in response to it. And then there are other sirens that have a voice that speaks to people, tells them what the warning is and what they should do to protect themselves. And in both cases, one of the challenges is being loud enough and intelligible by the person who hears the signal to know what it is that they're supposed to be responding to. And we know that sirens are quite prevalent in places where they have a recurring, seasonal, fast-moving kind of a hazard. We hear about them most frequently for things like tornadoes.
I am a Midwest girl. I grew up with the tornado sirens and all of that thing. And it's one of those education pieces too, where I feel like when you hear the tornado siren, you know what your call to action is. If Texas is to look at something like a siren system specifically in that flash flood alley, um, what else are they going to need to do as an education component? So it's not just this loud thing that people hear, but they understand what they're supposed to do.
I think that's going to be a real challenge, because Texas has floods, but they have tornadoes and floods and dust storms and severe thunderstorms with lightning. There could be any number of things that a siren could be set off for. So if Texas were to choose a siren that has just a tone, there's going to be a need for public education, that helps people to understand what the different tones mean and what they're supposed to do in response to those tones. But I think one of the things that we've seen in that river valley is that there's a lot of people who come there who are not from the area and would not have been part of that public education campaign ahead of time, which suggests that the local organizations that provide vacation spots for tourists who are coming in to spend their time there, or campers or others, they need to provide that educational information to people as they're entering into that zone and be prepared to help people to understand what the sirens mean. Um, I think one of the challenges that we saw with Hawaii is that their sirens were designed to direct people to go and search for more information, which means that when you're trying to get people to act quickly in response to that signal, that people have to go and search on the internet for information about how to interpret what's happening, which actually adds an additional layer to the emergency manager's tasks because they then have to make sure that their website is up to date or that they've posted something on some other channel like social media so that people can find the accurate information that's really timely about that particular hazard they're warning about at that moment. So there's a lot of dimensions to it, and public education has to be something that happens before the event, but also during the event, especially if people have to go look for more information.
I feel like we've seen a lot of states take a layered approach like that. And that is something that Texas is looking at too about text messages that you can sign up for at the DMV for emergency alerts. The alert system. Uh, how big of a deal is it to layer those types of communications and alerts so there's not just one end all be all warning system?
It's very important to layer alert systems because not everyone is going to hear a siren. Some people will be too far away to hear it audibly. Some people will be inside and won't hear it. That's the reason that we have opt-in alerting systems where people can receive a text or an email or a phone call. We also have alerting systems through the Wireless Emergency Alert Service, which is run by FEMA, the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, IPAWS. And those messages are delivered to people whose phones are within the geo-targeted area. And it does not require people to opt in. And the wireless emergency alert messages go with you if you cross into another county because it's based upon where you are in relation to that cell tower. So because there's not just one way to get information and people have different tolerance for different kinds of devices. Some people might want to use a weather radio because they've always had weather radio, and others prefer to receive a text message on their phone. We all have preferences for how we receive information, but even more important is that when it's an event that is as dire as what we've seen in Kerrville, using every channel to reach people becomes so important to help to save lives. We cannot neglect one. Um, it, I think we have to, let me back up. I think we have to consider the cost related to the cost of lives and not just the cost to the pocketbook.
And I'm glad that you brought up those WEA alerts. We were looking at a study from 2023 that showed 1 in 6 people in Texas have opted out of those alerts. Why is that a big deal that Texas is more likely to ignore those warnings or opt out of them?
So that's a study from the Rand Corporation, right? Yeah. So the Rand Corporation did an investigation following the National Alert Test a year ago, and that was funded by FEMA and the FCC. And it was a massive sample of people across the country. They sampled 85,000 people. And they then correlated the responses that they got from that survey with information about the alerts that have gone out across the United States for different event types and hazard severity. And what they found was that in Texas, Texas has the highest number of opt-outs for the wireless emergency alert service. And when they look at Texas's practices, they see that Texas issues the most statewide alerts and the most Amber alerts. And we also know that Texas has issued a few blue alerts that have gone out statewide, especially one a few months ago that was very, very early in the morning. And the FCC received more than 6,000 complaints about that message. So there's a lot of practices that have led people to become unwilling to continue to receive WIAs. So the danger of this is that when a person opts out of receiving a WIA because of their experience with ongoing alerting for things that they don't perceive to be relevant to them or annoying or untimely, they will not receive that imminent threat alert if they're in a really dire situation, such as a significant flash flood event. So the emergency manager essentially loses their ability to reach people when they really need to reach people because of their prior practices. There have been requests from emergency managers to make some alerts silent and some alerts audible. There have been proposals from the FCC that some alerts be sent as silent alerts and some be issued as audible alerts. So there are certainly a lot of conversations about that. I think that given the challenges that we see with issuing good messages, asking the person who's sitting at the keyboard to select under what conditions it's going out as an audible message or a non-audible message is just one more task. And because there's not a consistent policy across organizations, across counties about what hazards rise to the level of being audible and which ones do not, you're going to have a lot of variety around that decision as well. Someone might decide that that blue alert that goes out at 3 a.m. should be audible. Does the public get to help to decide what should be audible and what shouldn't be? That was not one of the things the FCC proposed. Um, so there's a lot of conversation around it. I do believe that it is the sound that is one of the triggers causing people to be most frustrated with it, especially when it intersects with the wrong time of day. Um, However, if we turn off the sound for WEAs, it means that you don't have the most important tool in that toolkit, which is getting people's attention.
Especially now that we're all so glued to our devices all the time.
Absolutely. And there's research that says that people get 50 or more notifications a day. And so if you send something silent and you really wanted people to pay attention to that, how are they going to know that that is the thing they really need to be tuned into? We are just constantly receiving information that we have to make a decision about all day long. And if it's meaningful enough, or if it's an issue that requires attention, we need to get people's attention.
What do you think the solution is specifically for a state that's as big as Texas? Please excuse my dog. Um, what do you think the solution is for a state that's as big as Texas is that needs all of these types of alerts, but people are opting out?
It's really hard to get people to sign up for alerts because it means giving up some of your personal information to a local government that will then be able to call you or email you. It's really hard to get people's attention. It's very difficult to utilize social media as an alerting system because the algorithm prevents that information from rising to the top, and you have to already be tuned into it and logged on. So if you can't reach people through their cell phones, people aren't opting in, you can't get them through social media, then it has to be something else that's very intrusive that busts into their daily life. Um, a siren is one of the few things that does that. Another thing is somebody driving down the street with a bullhorn or a neighbor knocking on your door. So you may have to rely on these older styles of technology to get the word out, um, if people are going to close themselves off from other avenues. It's also possible that some people just don't want to be alerted. One of the, I think, important things about the study that was done by RAND is that they correlated the frequency and the type of alert and the geography of the alert with opt-outs, and then drew some conclusions. And while the conclusions make sense, messages that are sent frequently, that are loud in the middle of the night to a broad area for things that are not imminent threats, we don't know specifically why people chose to opt out. And so there may have been other triggers that were causing them to say, I've had enough, I'm annoyed, I can't live with this indecision anymore. If we can figure out what it is that's causing people to want to turn them off, more specifically, we might be able to help create policies to help them to turn them back on. Right now, we're kind of guessing because it was a correlational study. And it was a really good study. Don't get me wrong on that. Big and expensive, but I think that there's more nuance to understanding why people choose to opt out, that we could investigate more. How to get people to turn them back on? I don't know. Um, if you consider the frequency of flooding that we've experienced across this nation in the last 2 weeks, these events have become so big, it's like we are constantly on alert now. And asking people to remain on high alert for extended periods of time, that is the mark of beginning to experience warning fatigue, which would cause people to want to turn it off. But it just makes them so much less safe. And it will require people additional channels to confirm that that threat is truly relevant to them now. So I don't have a solution for helping people to opt back in. Policy has got to be one of them. Really clear decision-making policy around when messages will be issued or when sirens will be utilized, and helping people to understand those conditions so they don't feel like they're being abused by being constantly bombarded. Um, so creating the policy and then utilizing that. Um, and I think one of the things we didn't talk about at all is effective messaging. That some of the messages that we see go out are just so incomplete that they have got to be ineffective because people don't know who the message is from. They don't know the specific location of impact of the hazard. They're not told exactly what to do in response to the threat. And so when people don't have that information, it's meaningless. So we have to think about the content of those messages that people are receiving in addition to the channels and the frequency and the relevancy. It's a big, big question. I'm really glad that you're looking at all of the different angles because it's really important.